Amy Stegmeyer of Stonemeyer Games, and I am here for my weekly livecast. It's April 14th, 2021, and I just wanted to start out by thanking you. If you watched last week live or on YouTube, or you reached out to me via the blog post I wrote on Monday, I just wanted to thank you for your compassion and your sympathy and your thoughts for my dad, who was in rough shape in the hospital last week at this time. I found out right before I went live last week. I knew that my dad was in the hospital. He was in for surgery earlier that week, and the surgery went great. But the recovery that followed, the next couple of days that followed, were really rough, and they kept getting worse and worse. Um, and I found out right before I went live last Wednesday really how bad it was and how frail he was. It wasn't life threatening at the time, but it wasn't good. It was quite bad, quite unexpected. And I shared a little piece of that at the end of last week's video. And so many of you reached out to me by email or in the comments on the YouTube or here. And it just really meant a lot to me, and it meant a lot to my family. So thank you so much for doing that. The good news is my dad turned a big corner after that. Not that day, not on Wednesday. I think Wednesday night was his worst night. But then on Thursday, things really turned around. His internal organs basically reactivated finally, or started to reactivate, and he got off some of the I won't go into the details, but he turned a big corner. He got incredibly better. I was able to actually talk to him for the first time in a few days. He's in Virginia. He's pretty far away, but he's under good care. My brother and sister are there. My mom's there. They all live there in Virginia. And turned a big corner. I got to talk to him on Thursday, talked to him on Friday, getting better and better, talked to him on Saturday and Sunday, talked to him yesterday, and he's actually now back home. So he's still on the road to recovery, but whereas the recovery started out really poorly, it is now going really well. It's going as it should go for the type of surgery that he had. So again, I don't want to dwell on this too much, but it has been on my mind a lot lately, and it has meant a lot to me that it's been on your mind a little bit too over the last week. It really does mean a lot to me. Thank you for that. Um, so yeah, I guess I have some topics that are unrelated to this today, as usual. I have some Stomar Games news. I'm happy to answer your questions about anything as usual, and I will jump right into that. But I can pop back into this because I'm guessing some people might pop in and not catch this first part, and I'll reiterate a little bit of that. I'll start out with a fun thing today, and that is the chocolate of the day, as usual. This week it's from here. I'll show you some chocolate, but I'll show you where it's from first. It's from C's Candies. Mitchell, friend of Stonemeyer Games and the person behind the Your Tech Report podcast on Sirius Radio. It's a radio show, but it's also, I believe, a podcast. It's on YouTube. He sent me C's chocolates. This is one of the two boxes he sent. He generously sent two boxes, and we are really looking forward to digging into some of these. We've dug quite deep into the other box, and it's been a delight. I mean, C's makes really good chocolates, and we have really enjoyed them so far. So thank you, Mitchell, for doing that. That was very kind of you. Um, we also had some treats actually this past weekend. If you're ever in St. Louis, there are so many good treats in St. Louis. If you're in the mood for some sweets, um, including too many to mention now. I mentioned that on my mini live cast, but one that was relevant this past weekend is that I went to Whisk. It's a sustainable bakery here in St. Louis. And we went there this past weekend for the first time. We've had their stuff at the farmers market. They're at the Tower Grove Farmers Market on Saturdays, but we had never actually been to their location. And we went there, and we felt literally like a kids in candy shops. So we just picked out a bunch of different cookies and popsicles and things to try, all homemade, all from scratch, all so delicious. And the people who run the store are actually gamers. They are aware of my company. I don't know if they've actually played my games, but they are gamers in the gaming community. So it's wonderful to support some fellow gamers and their passion. And we benefited from the delicious treats. Alex is joining us from Mexico here, and he says, "What is or was the game that puts the idea in your head to become a designer?" Um, I think Alex is. It's a long comment, but he's asking, like, was there one game that made me say I want to be a game designer? And Alex, it's tough to answer that because as soon as I kind of discovered games as a kid, when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, I also wanted to design games, and I did start to design games back then. Um, the I guess the best answer I can say is that the first game I designed was essentially a medieval Camelot version of Monopoly. And that was back when I was 7 or 8 years old. So the most accurate answer I can say for this is Monopoly as a kid, because it inspired me to design my first game called Medieval Quest way back in the day. As an adult, when I kind of returned to game design, I designed games throughout my whole life, off and on, just for fun. When I returned to game design as an adult, for viticulture specifically, viticulture I designed specifically to put on Kickstarter back in. I started designing in 2011. The Kickstarter was in 2012, and one of the main inspirations for that was a game called Fresco. Fresco is a really excellent worker placement game. I think it's available in a big box version now from Queen Games. So that was not necessarily the inspiration for me to become a designer, but it was the inspiration, or a part of the inspiration for viticulture. There's some nice comments here about my dad, and so thank you for chiming in here as well. That means a lot to me. Dave says, "Where in Virginia are you from?" I grew up in Chesterfield, Virginia. Spent a lot of time in Chesterfield and Richmond, where I went to high school. Tony says, "Am I excited about the new Kickstarter for Canvas, the Canvas expansion?" He says, "I know you're a fan, and your recommendation turned me on to that fantastic game." That's exciting to hear, Tony. Yeah, I love Canvas. Canvas is I would say it's a gateway plus set collection game that uses some beautiful components, including clear cards that you're stacking together to form paintings. And their reprint and expansion campaign went live yesterday. And this is a weird thing. Will just comment on this because I'm not a backer yet. I love the game, but I feel like I haven't had the game long enough to feel the need that I need an expansion for because I'm still kind of exploring the game. So it makes me wonder out loud, just as I'm talking out loud here, I might end up backing it. I think it's a great campaign. It's a good company. It's a fair price they offer. All that stuff. It's likely that I'll end up backing it. But I wonder if there's kind of a sweet spot between when a game originally comes out and when the first expansion comes out, or particularly if it's an expansion Kickstarter, where it's just long enough that people have played the game and feel the need for an expansion, versus being too far away from it and people are no longer even thinking about the game, or it's too close to the initial release and they don't feel the need for the expansion yet, especially for a game that's highly replayable like Canvas. I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Do you guys feel that there's a sweet spot there for when an expansion campaign or release is relative to the original delivery of the game? And I guess notable about Kickstarter is that the campaign is now, so I'm thinking about it now, but I don't have a felt need for it yet. Whereas when it actually delivers, when the campaign is over with and delivers months and months later, I might have a felt need for it then. So maybe it's one of those campaigns that I'll back for the Pledge Manager, and then when the Pledge Manager releases months later, that I'll have the felt need for it at that point. Jerry says, "I know you're working on a Wingspan big box, but have you considered deeper card trays similar to the current ones, but perhaps twice as deep? Still usable while playing and obviously great for storage." We haven't really thought about that, Jerry. I think it's a fine idea. We are designing some special inserts to go into the big box. They aren't card inserts, but it's pretty important. And at some point, I have to decide if this is really a high priority. But currently, to me, it is pretty important that we make use of the plastic components that we've already put into Wingspan and the expansions, particularly those plastic trays and those inserts. They serve the dual purpose of being card trays and holding the cards themselves during storage. Because I really don't want to create plastic that is disposed. The purpose of any plastic in our games is that you actually use it and that you don't throw it away, you don't recycle it. It doesn't create an environmental burden at that point in the life cycle of the game. And so, if we created something that makes those trays irrelevant through the big box, it just seems like a waste to me. And I don't want to create waste if we can help that. I think there probably are ways around it where we could make a twice deep tray that's just as deep as the trays that you have, and so you can kind of have both in the box. The box can be designed to fit both of them. We could consider that, but I wanted to mention that that's my thought process about those trays at this point. Tim says that his wife is pregnant with our second child. Congratulations on that, Tim. So we're on a Reese's kick. He says he had a new Reese's cake bar this morning. It was decent enough. I like the peanut butter cups with pretzels in them. Reese's Cake Bar. That sounds delicious. If any of you, I love hearing what your treats of the day are, so feel free to always share them. Thank you for sharing that, Tim. What else is going on with me? Some games that I played recently. I played Cubitos over the weekend. I played the Fantasy Realms Cursed Horde expansion that I think I am talking about on tomorrow's YouTube video. More on that in a second, the exact phrasing for what I just said there. I played Arch Travels. I played Wizard and Small Islands. What else did I play with Joe last week? I played a bunch of games with Joe last week. He came over and showed me a bunch of games. Showed me Chainmail, and he showed me that's from Button Shy Games, and also showed me Legendary Creatures and 1987 Channel Tunnel was another one that hit the table then. And Megan and I are also delving into the second story arc in the Hero Realms cooperative campaign. We're enjoying that so far. And the reason I mentioned that phrasing is that I wanted to share like a little inside baseball with you today, a little inside sneak peek. Um, Walter's right behind me. Hold on here. I gotta give Walter some food. Here you go. So the inside thing that you may not know, so I have this YouTube channel where I talk about game design, do 2 videos every week about specific games, and then a longer form video on Sunday. And years ago, back in the day, maybe even not all that long ago, I used to film those videos on the same day. That was kind of like one of my tasks for that day, to sit down, film a video, put it up on YouTube right away. And I realized over the years, I think, that I didn't have to actually film it on that same day. I could film it in advance. I could film a couple videos in a row. I could have like a filming day where I filmed a bunch of stuff and then staggered and scheduled the releases. And so yesterday, I think I set a record because I filmed 7 videos yesterday. 6 were about games. 1 was a longer form video for a future Sunday. And I'm now 2 months ahead of schedule. Well, not ahead of schedule. I've booked out 2 months worth of game design videos, and I'm about a month out for the longer form videos, which is helpful because sometimes I have a unnaturally busy week or an unexpectedly busy week, and I can't film anything that week. But I want to let you know that a little inside scoop here that the videos that you watch are often filmed pretty soon after I played the games, and oftentimes well in advance. I do make room, like I can shift around the schedule as much as I want. So if I play a game like Cubitos that a lot of people are talking about right now, I might bump that up. I won't wait 2 months to release that one. I'll bump it up in advance. But I'm guessing I am not alone among YouTubers in doing this. I think a lot of YouTubers probably film fairly far in advance, or at least a little bit in advance, or not on the same day. I wanted to share that with you, just a little inside sneak peek. Christopher says that he just got the Scythe modular board from his friendly local game store and got it to the table immediately. That's awesome, Christopher. Thank you for checking that out. Yeah, I'm really happy with how that modular board turned out. It was one of the last Scythe products that we made. I'm thinking only the complete rulebook came after that. And I'm glad you had a good experience with it. Carlos says, when a board game has personal objectives and you have the option of getting one and discarding one, like in Wingspan has some cards that do that, some bird cards and also at the beginning of the game. Okay, so he's referencing that question. Let's see. He says, I guess discarding in Wingspan makes sense since you may acquire new objectives during gameplay. But for starting personal objectives, when do you think is better for discarding versus scoring only a subset of objectives? Okay, he's comparing Wingspan to Scythe. I think I missed that, Carlos. Where in Scythe, you get 2 objectives at the beginning of the game, but you can only accomplish one for most factions. You accomplish one, and then you get rid of the other one. That's interesting. I guess it is 2 different styles of design there. I don't think one is wrong or right over the other, but yeah, and Scythe, I guess I didn't want to pigeonhole anyone into a strategy before they even start the game, and I didn't even really want to give them a decision to make before they started the game, so that they could kind of get a feel for the game flow, maybe the first encounter they get. Just to see how things work out a little bit before they make a decision about that objective. And I didn't want them to get an objective that just didn't work for them based on their faction, their player mat combination, or their gaming philosophy. So they have a few options there. And so I think that's why I did it for Scythe. For Wingspan, I think we did it the other way because it gives you just like a little nudge, something to focus on when you're even from the first decision point of the game, which bird cards do you keep? And if you keep that open, if you have two objectives, then you're kind of pulled in two different directions, and you might feel a sense of loss in a way if you have to eventually give up one of those bonus cards. Um, so I don't know. I think it really depends on the game. I think it depends heavily on the game that you're working on. Vito says, if someone was thinking about moving to St. Louis, how would you say the job and housing market is there? It's hard to say about the job market. I think there's big companies and small companies here that are doing well. There are also big companies and small companies here that aren't doing well. I don't have a good answer for the job market. That's hard for me to answer. I would say the housing market in the St. Louis area and probably a lot of the U.S. is very, very strong right now. So it's a seller's market, and so for a buyer, it is hard to get. Like there are lots of options entering the market, but they go very, very quickly. Uh, so I would say it's probably like it's a good time to buy a home because the interest rates are so low, but they just go so fast. Like right now, we are trying to help some friends who want to move to St. Louis, and every once in a while they send us a place that they want us to go check out. Like we'll go to the neighborhood and just kind of look at it for them because they don't live in St. Louis, and they typically have like once these houses go on the market, they have a couple days, maybe a week at most, to put in an offer, and then it is done. It is off the market. Whereas like when we bought our condo, my home office that you can see behind us, it was on the market for a good month, maybe month and a half. We didn't feel any rush, any pressure. It was really nice. I think we bought it at a good time, although the interest rates were a little higher then. But I can't imagine like having like a weekend or a week to make a decision about a home that's going to impact you for the next 30 years or for a long time, however long you keep it. So housing market, that's a long answer for how the housing market's doing right now. Uh, Tim says, uh, Tim says, I've been backing crowdfunding campaigns per your recommendation in your book. He says he's learning a lot about the process through their updates. He backed Fjords, Clash of Deck, Poetic License, Hippocrates, and Poetry Slam. And he's also considering Australia. So Tim is referencing one of the big pieces of advice I give to crowdfunders in my book, which is uh, go back. Like you may have already done this, you may have already backed crowdfunding campaigns, but you may have not followed them from the eyes of a potential creator. And so if you are thinking about being a crowdfunder or an entrepreneur of any kind, I think it's worth backing a few Kickstarter campaigns, even just for a dollar. You don't have to go all in. And following the campaigns closely from the eyes of a potential creator someday, seeing what you like, what you don't like, what's frustrating, when you get impatient, or when you have moments like memorable moments, really really fun things happen during the campaign, and you can emulate them potentially in a future campaign for yourself. So I think it's great that you're doing that, Tim. Jordan says, do you generally get more joy from designing new core games or expansions for existing games? That's a good question, Jordan. I mean, the answer for a lot of things for me is I like variety. So I like a little bit of both. I wouldn't want to just design core games, and I wouldn't just want to design expansions. Expansions are certainly easier to design because I already know how the game works. I know what makes the game fun. Maybe I have a few ideas of things that could be a little better in the game, and I can approach them with the expansions. With the with designing a core game though, anything is possible, and that's fun too. It's also daunting because I can do anything with a core game. I have no restrictions at that point, and so it's both daunting but also freeing and flexible. So it's hard for me to say. I do like a little bit of both, a mix of the two. Um, my video this past week was about if you speaking of core games that I've designed, it was a video about if you love Tapestry, if you love my game Tapestry, some other games that you might also enjoy. I've done a few videos like this for Scythe and Wingspan now, where I recommend. I think I usually recommend one game that we've published, one other game that we published, and then 10 games from other publishers, other designers that I would recommend if you love that particular game. And I go into pretty detailed reasons why, for example, why I love Tapestry, 10 things that I love about Tapestry, and other games that do those things really, really well. So if you enjoy Tapestry, feel free to check out that video. You can also check out that video and maybe discover that Tapestry might be a game for you also. Um, and last Thursday, let's see, blog post that I did recently. I did a blog post on Monday about, what was Monday's blog post? Uh, oh, it was actually about last week's Facebook Live video. Um, and then last Thursday, I did a long post, an annual post that I do called our annual Stakeholder Report, where I talk about how Stonemaier Games is doing, how we did in the last year, both in terms of numbers and some stories along the way, and what we're looking forward to doing in 2021, what we are doing and will do in 2021. So if you're watching this, you are in a way a stakeholder of Stonemaier Games. This is different than a shareholder, someone who owns, who has invested in Stonemaier Games, owns a part of Stonemaier Games. As a stakeholder, you have a personal stake in Stonemaier Games. Maybe you want us to make games. Maybe you just enjoy the content that I create, or maybe you don't enjoy any of that, but you're still intrigued, or however your involvement is. If you're watching this, you are in some way a stakeholder. You might want to check out that blog post from last Thursday. Renzo is joining us from Peru, and they say, what would you advise to someone who has interest in game design? Where would you start? I would recommend starting. I have a page on the Stonemaier Games website called How to Design a Tabletop Game. And it's a series of articles and videos that kind of walks you through the process and integrates you into the process of designing a board game. I would start there. I even have a section, I think, called like Start Here on that page of our website. Jonathan is joining us from Ottawa, and he says, "Oh, how's shipping going with Red Rising?" Yes, thank you for asking about shipping. The Red Rising finally arrived in the U.S., and the U.S. our fulfillment center in the U.S. handles all shipments in the U.S. and all shipments not to Canada, not to Europe, and not to Australia and New Zealand. So all other areas. So they are working on that now. This week, next week. This week will be probably all champions, and the next week will probably be a little bit of champion shipments and then non-champion shipments. In Canada, which is what you were asking about, our shipment also arrived last week, or it did arrive last week. They've processed it, they're packaging it, and the word that I got on either Monday or Tuesday is that they are looking to start actually shipping out the games probably today. It might have been yesterday, maybe today or tomorrow. My broad answer, though, I know you might hear that a friend of yours gets a shipping notification. When your order ships, you definitely will get a shipping notification. You'll know then. And that will likely be this week. Could be next week if you're not a champion. Yeah, so that's the information I have right now from our fulfillment centers. But I mean, the real, I stress that the real answer, the real time that you'll know when your order ships is when you get that shipping notification, because it really can vary based on the processes for each of these fulfillment centers. Yeah. Allison has a comment that I mentioned about the Canvas Kickstarter. She says, I'm glad you talked about the time distance of the Canvas Kickstarters. She says, I thought it felt really fast too, but there's so much talk about the game just because it was just fulfilled recently. So they might be riding that wave of interest. And yeah, I can definitely see that. Like that's the tough thing. You don't want to wait until no one's talking about the game anymore. Hopefully that isn't the case, but if you create a great game, people might be talking about it for a long time. But you're right, it can be a good time to do it, especially for a reprint when people are actively talking about it and are excited about the game. The reprint, I think the reprint is maybe a little different than the expansions in that case. Patrick says, my mom loves Canvas. She actually had wished early on that she could flip pictures over to make them neater. And that's actually, as Patrick mentioned, that's part of the expansion. You have some reversible images. Yeah, and Patrick says, I feel this could be a one and done expansion. Stefan says, my non-gamer buddy loved Wingspan the other night. Well, thank you for introducing a non-gamer to Wingspan. While cleaning up, he asked if the Stonemaier Games, the S&M on the trays, Stonemaier Games logo, the acronym SM, on the trays was for Wingspan, since he was reading the WS upside down. Pretty cool coincidence. Yeah, total coincidence, but it is a nice one. Suzanne says that she's been binging Wingspan on Switch, because Wingspan is still available on Switch and Steam, still waiting for the iOS and Android versions of it. She says it's so relaxing after a busy day. Any plans for viticulture going to the Switch? I hope so. I'm not aware of any plans that Digidice is working on. Digidice has been a little slower than I would hope to really boost Wingspan's digital profile by bringing Tuscany to it, especially the Tuscany board. I think that's a kind of a key turning point for the digital port of Wingspan. So I'd almost rather than focus on that before Switch, but it would be cool at any point if they can get it onto Switch. I bug them every now and then to see what's going on with that, but I haven't heard much very recently. Carol's here. Carol says she just played Lost Ruins of Arnak on Board Game Arena this week. Well, that's cool that it's already on Board Game Arena. That's awesome. What do you think about when people continually compare two games because of a similar mechanism, even if they are really different? Do you think this can confuse people, or is it beneficial? Um, Carol points out that Arnak and Dune Imperium are consistently in the same conversation, but after one play, I find them very different in format and theme. And Carol, she goes on to say, now I find it odd that people keep comparing them, and I'm not sure if it could be misleading to people. I kind of lean towards the unintentionally misleading perspective that you're sharing here, Carol, because Dune Imperium and Lost Ruins of Arnak came out at very similar times, around the same time last year, and they are both deck building games with worker placement. So that's kind of the comparison point. But I agree with you. I heard them compared a lot, and I've played both of them multiple times at this point. I like them both for different reasons, but they are very different games, very different games. Um, yeah, just completely different games almost. Other than that core idea, the core ideas of those mechanisms. And so I guess your question is, is it more misleading? And I would say I think so. But I would say if someone says I really like Dune Imperium, I might say, oh, you might also try Lost Ruins of Arnak. It has some similar core mechanisms. Or if someone says the vice versa, I might recommend Dune Imperium. So that I think is helpful when you're using it as a point of recommendation. But I think the problem with comparing them so closely is that people often end up deciding between the two of them as if they are comparable in a buying choice, a purchase choice. Whereas I think they're so different that they are completely two independent purchase decisions when you're deciding which game to purchase. That's my 2 cents. Tom says, how is the new Tapster expansion going? It's going great. Going great. He says, will it be a similar size expansion to Plans and Ploys? That's a great question, but I won't talk about that till later in the year. Our next expansion that we will be actively talking about is the Between Two Castles expansion, which I teased a little bit on Instagram today. My full discussion about it will be on, or not full discussion, I'll start to reveal what's in the Between Two Castles expansion on March 5th. Kevin says, I want to know your thoughts on Cubitos. I'll delve into it in my game design video pretty soon, but my first impression was that I really enjoyed it enough that we played 2 games back to back. They weren't long games. I kind of thought it was going to be a little longer game, but it was around 45 minutes, which I think is the right length for the game. I love push your luck. I love racing games. I love engine building games, and I had a lot of fun playing it. Yeah. Let me jump over here. Yeah, well, actually, I'm behind on questions. So let me try to catch up here. Cody says, I always love the component hook in your games. Do you ever think about what components you would change when you play games by different publishers? If so, what would you have done with components from my favorite non-Stellar game, Terraforming Mars? I do occasionally see a component in the game and think, okay, I wonder why they didn't do this. I wonder why they didn't make it a little bit nicer. Usually, though, the answer is budget and cost, and that's not necessarily a bad thing to have, cardboard tokens instead of wood tokens if it made the game more cost effective. If it built it into a certain price category that was more appealing to people based on maybe the weight of the game. For Terraforming Mars, I would have gone with some form of dual layered player mats or an overlay to go with the player mats. I think that's kind of the most common thing that people say about Terraforming Mars. Where it's kind of missing, and in Terraforming Mars it's functional because if you bump those player mats, which can actually happen in Terraforming Mars, you lose how much income that you should be gaining, and that's a pretty big issue. But there are plenty of third-party solutions for that, and also, how often do you really bump the table so much that all tokens on the table go scattering across the board and scattering to the point that you lose track of them? I think that's pretty rare, but that would be the component that I would upgrade or change. Patrick says, Mother's Day is coming up. Is there something that you usually do to spoil your mom on that day? I wouldn't say I have necessarily a tradition. I usually send her a card and give her a call. Sometimes I send flowers, but I wouldn't say I have a set tradition for doing so. But I'm open to ideas. If anyone's done anything fun for their moms that they really enjoy that I haven't thought of, I'd love to hear about it. Paul has a nice comment about my dad. Um, and he says, I know the web store says that Wingspan Oceania is back in stock in May, but do you have a rough date? Really tough to have a rough date on that, Paul, because it's just based on when the shipping containers actually arrive at various fulfillment centers. So I don't have a date that's any more accurate than sometime in May. Whenever you hear a month like that, I would not assume like May 1st. I would generally think that sometime in May, even probably later in May, it will be back in stock in fulfillment centers. Um, yeah, that's my best guess at this point. That's also the case, I believe, for Tuscany. Tuscany's been out of stock for a little bit, but I think we should have it back in stock soon. Dave says, have I played any baseball board games? I have not. No, I have not. Tim says, do I change clothes for each video? No, I don't. Actually, Tim is asking about how I film often more than one video on a day. And I used to do that. I used to like change shirts or sweaters when I was doing one or two videos on a day. But yesterday I filmed 7 videos and I just wore the same clothes every time. So you can kind of tell that. You can also tell if Jamie may have filmed this video on the same day as another video that came out weeks later because I was wearing the same clothes in the video. Joel says, I've seen your calendar of games and we have a few lights on the viticulture expansion. He's referring to the progress chart that I put on the news section of our website and on our e-newsletter. He says, is there anything that I can share with you about the viticulture expansion? I could, but I'm not going to. I appreciate your interest in the viticulture expansion. I look forward to talking about that probably in early 2022. That's, I think, what we're looking at for the viticulture expansion. Let's see. Jonathan has a long comment here. Jonathan, let's see. He says something that I just thought of in relation to the ecological impact of plastic in games. If we are in a situation where we've bought deluxe components, like the speckled eggs for Wingspan or a third-party component for another game, that leave us with components that we don't need, could there be a situation where you send the originals back to you? You can use them for subsequent copies of the game and possibly maybe do something to reimburse people who pursue that idea. I think that's a great thought. It doesn't work, but it's a good thought. I think this is the spark of something that could be good. We don't manufacture games here in St. Louis. Like if you send something back to us, we can't really do anything with it. It would just become replacement parts, and we have plenty of replacement parts. So you would have to like literally send it back to China, or we would have to send it back to China for our manufacturer to put those back in future copies of the games. And I can't see that many people sending any component back to us. And then there's the the environmental impact of actually mailing those things, mailing it back to us, and us then mailing it back to China to put in the game. So I think the cons maybe pretty far outweigh the pros in that case. I think what you could do is use those components in another game. Oftentimes games have overlapping components. So if you replace a component, you can just use it in another game. You can often recycle components. That's definitely a possibility. Like if you replace cardboard tokens with the nicer tokens, you can recycle cardboard. And sometimes you can make them available for someone else. You can sell them to somebody else if you wanted. And so people often buy spare eggs from us, and so you could sell the extra eggs that you have. If you feel like you have extra eggs, because it's usually not a problem to have too many eggs in Wingspan, but you could sell the extra eggs that you have to somebody else. So I think there are lots of ways that you can do it directly without adding the extra burden on the environment and the postal service of shipping things to us and then having to ship them back to our manufacturer. Let's see. Marco says, any chance we are getting a Stonemeyer release for viticulture, arboriculture, and formaggio? For viticulture, yeah, I mean, we continue to reprint viticulture all the time. For arboriculture and formaggio, we kind of deemed them a while ago that they are not essential to the experience of viticulture. However, because some people have expressed interest in them, we worked with Print and Play Productions to make them accessible to people who want to buy them print on demand from Print and Play Productions. So that link is on our website. You're welcome to do that. And actually, this reminds me of a topic that I wanted to cover today, which is yesterday, for the first time, I opened up a form on the Wingspan page of our website, a different game here, but related topic, where you can go on this form and suggest a bird or two that you would love to see in Wingspan someday, whether it's in an expansion for a continent we haven't covered yet, or if it's even for a continent or a region that we have covered. It's possible that if we get enough interest in a few specific birds, we might do a promo pack of those most demanded birds someday. I also included an extinct category on there in case you want to include an extinct bird, and you can fill out the form multiple times. So check out that form. It's on the Wingspan Facebook page. It's also on the Wingspan page of our website. Feel free to check that out and suggest. It's one bird per form, but you can submit the form up to 5 times. Let's see. Edgar says, one thing I've noticed in your games is that with expansions, the table presence doesn't get bigger like the Everdell expansions that add more boards and make a larger game space necessary. Is that something you consider when designing an expansion, or does it just happen to never come up when designing an expansion? It is something I definitely think about. I think about table space all the time, for sure. Um, Even with core games, like with Tapster, Tapestry takes up a lot of table space. Uh, if we are adding something in the Tapestry expansion that creates more table space, that's something that we think about a lot and try to avoid because, especially with a game that already has a big table presence. Oftentimes, like you'll see that I expand outward if you have a player mat, like with viticulture. You have a structure mat that you add to the left of your vineyard mat, and that kind of extends it horizontally rather than vertically into the space where the game board is, things like that. So it is something I think about quite a bit. If we do think of something really, really cool that does just happens to take up more table space, we will still consider that if we think it belongs if it's good for the player experience. But we also understand that part of the experience is actually fitting the game on the table. Yeah, that's a great question, a great thing to think about, I think. Mario says, "What's the name of my book?" Yeah, it's the Crowdfunders or a Crowdfunder Strategy Guide. You can look at it if you go to the shop page of our website. You can see it there. It's on various sellers, both ebook and print version. I did this through a publisher called Barrett Kohler a couple years ago, and as far as I can tell, I think it still holds up today because a lot of the book it's telling a story, but it's also talking about philosophies to consider when you are preparing for and running a Kickstarter campaign. So while some of the specifics of running a campaign have changed over the years, those philosophies I think are still applicable. Jim's joining us today from What Board Game. Jim says, I've been moving Red Rising recently and been scoring with the app, which is Ace. Yes, so we actually now have a scoring app for Red Rising that you can use, which I think people in Canada and the US who are excited to get the game and around the world who are excited to finally get their copy of the game will soon get to use. Jim says, is there a scope for the app being used for future mini expansions, like rules tweaks, things like that? We don't really know yet what the future of Red Rising will be. It will be a product that we are going to be excited about for a long time and that we want to continue to support for a long time. But we put a lot into the core game, so we don't really know yet what future expansions will be. If we'll do promo packs of new characters, if we'll definitely we're going to wait until the second trilogy is finished, and then we're going to look at the possibility of an expansion or a standalone game then based on that second trilogy. So I don't know yet, but I think the app could be flexible enough to accommodate for those changes over time. Yeah. Rod says, when designing a game, more specifically in the balancing phase, do you mathematically model the game or do you have a more try and error approach? A little bit of both. We collect a lot of data during the blind playtesting stage. So it's not mathematical modeling, but we collect a lot of data. We analyze it. I even work with someone now whose specialty is analyzing data. And so he looks at all the data that we get from playtest reports and lets me know if he thinks there are some outliers that we need to look at, especially for asymmetric games. But I also look at anecdotal reports because sometimes something can mathematically be correct, but it can feel strong or feel weak to players, and that matters too. I think the players' feelings matter just as much as the actual math of the game. Yeah. Todd has a nice thank you comment here. Thank you, Todd. And he says, we're looking forward to Rise of Fenris as a family playthrough. That's awesome. That's exciting. Yeah, I'm still, Rise of Fenris is a campaign that I truly love the surprises that come up in Rise of Fenris. And it's one of those games that I almost wish I could wipe from my memory so that I could play through that expansion again without knowing anything about it. So I look forward to you having fun with that. Or I hope you have fun with it. Dave says that Keith Law listed Wingspan at number 2 on his top 100 board games list. I meant to look up this last week. I will look it up now. Keith Law, top 100 board games. I forgot to look at it. I think this is the 2020 edition. What's at number 1? Let's see. It's a long list. He put, maybe this is an outdated list because he put Seven Wonders at number 1 and then Carcassonne at number 2, Wingspan at number 3. This was the 2020 post. So maybe there's a more recent one, but that's the 2020 post that I see. Landon says, have I done a video about my favorite resource trackers? He references Terra Mystica versus Gaia Project. Gaia Project uses tracks, which I used later in Tapestry to keep track of resources, where you just need one token for each resource. Versus Terra Mystica, you kind of have piles of things. And uh, Landon mentions some pros and cons here. He says, I prefer Terra Mystica because I can set aside piles for specific buildings, which yeah, totally. I love doing that in Terra Mystica as you plan ahead for future turns. Then he says some games have completely different resources like cards for payment in Race for the Galaxy. I haven't done a video about that yet, but that is a good video idea that I will think about. Landon also says, what is your favorite resource token from any game? My favorite resource token? Hmm. I love the the squishy fruit. A lot of people are. This is a divisive thing, but I love the squishy fruit in Tidal Blades and Everdell. It feels like fruit. I really love that. And in that same way, I love the realistic resource tokens that we used to make and now are made by Top Shelf Gamer because they look like they look really close to the resource that they're meant to represent. Um, let's see. Matt says, I just learned how to play Euphoria and really enjoyed it. That's awesome, Matt. He says, as I started to look for online stuff, I stumbled upon Leaders of Euphoria. The art looks similar, but it isn't made by Stonemaier Games. What's the connection between the two games? Yeah, so Leaders of Euphoria, long story short, I guess, is that there was another company that is really good. They were previously called Overlord Games. I think they're now called Pull the Pin Games. Um, but their specialty was kind of large group bluffing social deduction games. And I thought that was a great fit for Euphoria. So I went to them at one point and said, hey, like, would you consider maybe working with us to create a game in the world of Euphoria that is a social deduction large group bluffing game? And they worked on it off and on. I was kind of served as a developer a little bit for the game, and it took a long time for them to figure it out. For us to figure it out, we worked together on it. But by the time they did, I kind of figured out that that wasn't the style of game that Stonemaier Games publishes. That we had come to kind of sit on medium weight Euro games at that point. And so I offered them the IP. I said, why don't you just use the Euphoria IP and publish the game under your company? And they did. And they ran a Kickstarter for it. I think they continue to sell it to this day. It's a really, really cool social deduction game, especially since when you get ousted from the game, you're not out of the game. You get kind of a new victory condition, but it's also not a complex game. So yeah, it's a really cool game. When we get back to the time where we can play large group social deduction games with people, that's one that I will always recommend because it is a lot of fun. I have a copy on my shelf right down here. Giovanni says, non-gaming question, have I ever been to Puerto Rico and do you know any second languages? I have been to Puerto Rico, went there I think around 10 years ago now and had a great time. It's a beautiful island and had some delicious food, still the best mussels of my life I think I had there. I do know, I speak English fluently, and I did speak Japanese conversationally. I studied Japanese for many years and studied abroad in Japan. I was very conversational when I was there. I'm very rusty now, but if I went back to Japan, I think it would activate some of that old vocabulary, and I would be fine. Phil says, Wingspan question. Expansion 3 looks like it's not going to be out in 2020. Do you have an update on when in 2022 it would be likely? I don't yet. But I do know that it won't be a 2021 release. Yeah. We're trying to give Elizabeth all the time she needs, while also hoping that she figures out what she wants to do with the expansion, in a timely manner. Let's see. Attila has some information that I don't know too much about the Canvas Kickstarter. He says, I'm really unhappy about one of the gameplay modules, player asymmetry, only being available in the deluxe version. He says, I have the non-deluxe version of the base game. Now I need to decide if I want to pass on this module, which looks like something that I enjoy, or have a game and an expansion with inconsistent components. Half deluxe, half normal. What do I think about this? I'd have to look into the specifics of the campaign. I would say as long as they are offering this module without requiring you to have a bunch of redundant components, I think that's fairly fine. I think it only becomes tricky if they say, okay, here's a module that you can only get if you buy all the stuff that you already have. I think that's a problem. I can relate to what you're saying, where if you buy this module, then you'll have a mix of wooden components and probably cardboard components. I think that's one of the main differences in the deluxe versus standard versions of Canvas, which I can see being a little annoying, but on the scale of annoyance, that's very low for me personally. I can see how that might be different for you. Let's see. Question here from someone in Greece. I actually can't. I can't. The name is in Greek, so I'm sorry. I can't. I don't know your name, but he says, "Do you know if Wingspan expansions will be translated into Greek? Here we have the base game in our language, but I've only seen the expansions in the English in stores." I don't know offhand. I don't work as much directly with our localization partners now, but I think that is a fantastic question for you to ask our Greek partner about that, the company that makes the Greek version of Wingspan. It's kind of that's their information to divulge if they want to. But if they have the rights to the Wingspan core game, they definitely have the rights to work with us to make the expansions as well. So it's nothing that we are holding up there. It's just a question for them to answer. Tim says, if I played Richard Garfield's Soul Forge, I have not played Soul Forge, no. He says it was a digital collectible card game over at Stoneblade Entertainment. It went offline years ago, but seems to be getting a resurrection with Soulforge Fusion coming to Kickstarter later this year. I've not played it. No, I've heard it that years ago it was compared to Hearthstone. I played a little bit of Hearthstone, but I haven't played Soulforge. But that's cool that they might have a reboot of it in the near future. Let's see. Lloyd says, I recently picked up Viticulture. Do I know when Tuscany will be back in stock? And I think it's May. I think we're looking at May for Tuscany to be back in stock. And the Lloyd said, I just answered that question. It looks like I'm a few minutes behind on questions here. Sorry about that. Melanie says, what does your personal play schedule look like? Like when I get to play with friends, and how has it changed due to COVID? So I used to host a weekly Wednesday game night, and then I would often play games on Thursdays at another game night, and then over the weekend with Megan or with friends, or both. And now that is largely the same, except it's all virtual. A lot of it is virtual, except the gaming with Megan. Almost all of it is virtual. Although I meet with masks with a few people in my bubble and play games. Like I played Cubitos in person with masks with people in my bubble this past weekend. So I would say usually I'm gaming once or twice on the weekend now, and I host my weekly game night, which is now virtual, every other night, every other Wednesday, and then I often join for the virtual Thursday game night that some other friends host as well. And actually now we also do get together every other Friday with another couple virtually to play games as well. Yeah, so it has changed quite a bit. The one blessing from the virtual games that I found, I still definitely miss the tabletop. I look forward to getting back to the tabletop. But I get to play with friends around the world and around the country that I wouldn't normally get to play with. So I have enjoyed that. And I might, even when we get back to in-person gaming, I might still have a virtual game night from time to time so I can connect with those people. Nico says, will there ever be more side expansions for Steam? I really hope so. I have definitely pushed the Knights of Unity for a long time now to get more expansion content to Steam, to Side Digital, and they're working on it, as far as I know. But yeah, they're working on it, but it's taken some time, and I appreciate your patience on that. Scott from GTS here says, knowing that you're a fan of the Red Rising books, what's your personal favorite house, either in the book or the game, and why? I think I tested into it. It's been a while since I took the test. We have a personality test on our website where you can test into one of the houses. I think I tested into House Series. I think that was it. So I'll say House Series for me. Scott, did you take the test on our website? I'm curious what house you test into. Sean says, do I know when Tapster or other Stonemaier games will appear on Board Game Arena? I don't know. No, that's up to Board Game Arena in terms of the games that we have in the pipeline with them. I think the one that has moved along the fastest, though, as some people have seen on Alpha, is Viticulture. Viticulture is available on Alpha in Board Game Arena. Cody says, have I played all of the West Kingdom games? If so, how would you rank them? I played Paladins of the West Kingdom and Architects, but I haven't played Viscounts. I would place Architects top and then Paladins, and Viscounts, I don't know yet. But I really do enjoy both Paladins and Architects, but I find myself wanting to return to Architects more often. Andy says that his copy of Red Rising is out for delivery. That's awesome, Andy. Win says, have you noticed that the color of the building board in viticulture is slightly different and darker than the color of the main board? I have, yeah. That's what happens when you kind of print things separately, things at different times. The ink is just a little different. Um, yeah, so it is a little slightly different. Joshua says that he finally played Parks and enjoyed it. One of my favorite kind of games with a one-way action selection track. He says he couldn't help but see influence from Stonemaier. High quality components, general time it took to play, easily readable symbols to help out gameplay. That's a nice compliment. Thank you for saying that. I don't know if we had any impact on Parks, but it is neat to see other games do those things. He says, do you ever consider the influence you've had on the next generation of game designers? I don't think about it. I don't know if people pay attention to me as a designer in that way, but I do like it is neat to see when there are moments where people say that to me, and it means a lot to me when they say that I've had some impact on them because I know how many there are hundreds thousands of other designers who have impacted me as a designer. So it's neat that maybe I've had some small positive impact on other designers as well. Let's see. Zach says, are there current plans to have a Wingspansion later this year? There are not. We are not on track to have a Wingspan expansion this year. I'm hoping that we'll have the Wingspan big box, which is just a box and an organizer, ready this year. Uh, but I'm still waiting on the second prototype, so I need to get through the prototype stage of that first. Chad says, what's my favorite sci-fi book? He says he just read The Humans, Dark Matter, and Recursion, and they were all great. What's a recent sci-fi book that I've really enjoyed? Um, I'll have to look at I'll pull up my list of books that I've read recently. Right now I'm reading, what is the name of it? I'm reading the latest book in the Shadow and Bone series, which is fantasy. It isn't sci-fi. Um, I read Machine Man is one of the most recent ones that I read. That was kind of a fun sci-fi take. I read Dune recently, which is sci-fi. Read Ready Player Two and enjoyed that. Yeah, so those are. I have a long list of sci-fi books that I enjoy. Most of the fiction that I read is either sci-fi or it is speculative fiction. I enjoyed the Expanse series quite a bit. I enjoy pretty much anything from John Scalzi. I think he's a great author. Um, yeah, those are a few I'll share right now. And I wanted to mention right now shows that we're watching. The last random topic I have is we're watching Invincible right now, which is on Amazon. It's a little gory, a little graphic, more than I want. But I like all the other aspects of the show. And we're watching the morning show on Apple TV right now. We're kind of going through Apple TV for a little bit while we have it. I'm totally open to recommendations there. In fact, we need a lunchtime show, which is like a 22 to 30-minute show on Apple TV. We need to find one that we really enjoy there. So if you have any recommendations for a lunchtime show, a shorter show on Apple TV, please let me know. And yes, we have already watched Ted Lasso, and we have already watched Mythic Quest, both of which we really enjoyed. Matt says, I recently watched and enjoyed your video about top 10 rewarding games. I wonder if you've played Whistle Mountain. I have not played Whistle Mountain. He says it does fall into this rewarding game. He also says Viscount of the West Kingdom could fall into that category. I've not played either of those games, so it sounds like I need to because I do love rewarding games. Jonathan says he has a cool story about the approachability of Wingspan for younger gamers. He says he first got Wingspan and his 6-year-old looked at the bird cards and said to me, Daddy, this bird lives in the forest area and eats mice. I was happy to see how easy it is for people to understand mechanisms in the game. That is really cool. That's, I guess, a testament, not just to Wingspan, but any game that does a good job of mixing theme and mechanisms, where you can just kind of make sense of it. This bird lives in the forest, and they like to eat rodents. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Guillaume says, do I like silk-screened meeples? I do. Yeah, we have some of those in Tuscany, actually. Yeah. George says he's studying and closely reading the Stonemaier Games submission guidelines for a good implementation in a game that I'm working on, which will be ready far off in the future. Well, that's exciting. I hope you have fun with that game design, George, and I look forward to seeing it someday on our submission form. Brian says, I recently started playing disc golf about a month ago, and he's still awful, but he's having fun. I kind of feel the same way. I'm about coming up on a year into my disc golf hobby, but I'm still pretty bad. Brian says, do you have any preferred brand of disc and or a favorite disc? I mostly use Innova discs, but I really love my Bullfrog putter. I don't know what brand makes Bullfrog, but I really like that putter. and I love my cheetah. My cheetah is from Innova. I have two now because one of them's all dented up, but that is my forehand. If I have a straight shot through some trees, I'm throwing that cheetah. Really, if I'm doing anything with the forehand on a fairway or I needed to go pretty far distance, I'm using that cheetah. Morgan says, "Have I checked out Flesh and Blood yet? If so, just wondering what you think of the mechanisms. I am definitely fascinated by Flesh and Blood, but I've not played it yet. I hear Covenant talk about it on the Covenant cast all the time, and I've looked into a few of the mechanisms, but I haven't actually played it yet. I need to do that at some point in the future." Sean just asked, "Am I reading any new books?" And yeah, the book I can't remember the name offhand. It's in the Grisha series, which actually will very soon be a Netflix series in the Shadow and Bone series. I forget the exact title of the book. Win says, "Love to hear your thoughts on Unstable Unicorn and Here to Slay." Yeah, I'll have to play them at some point. I haven't played those games. I think they're probably in a lighter category than games that I usually play, but I'm happy to play anything once. Nathan says, "Aside from disc golf and climbing, do you have any other physical or sport-related hobbies?" Throughout my whole life, I've played a lot of soccer. I used to play a lot of pickup football and ultimate frisbee. So those are definitely up there. I enjoy hiking, although I really like, now that I've discovered disc golf, it's hard to go back to normal hiking because I love the hiking with a purpose element of disc golf. And I also work out every day. I do some light workouts, running some stairs, doing some weights, things like that, some core stuff. But yes, I would say if I had to pick a sport to play, soccer is that sport. Soccer is the main sport that I played my whole life. Uh, let's see. Just looking for a few more questions here as we wrap up. Tim says, "Any chance we can see the pendulum overlays?" Tim, I am getting new samples very soon, but I don't have the new sample yet. When I do, I will make sure that I show it to you on next week's live cast. So I think I should have it by then. Kevin says, "What do I think separates games that are very popular briefly compared to games that are popular over a greater length of time, besides from being great games?" I think there are a lot of different things. That's a great question. I think part of it is the game itself and how much people want to return to it, the replayability, the asymmetry in the game, if they're actually, how easy it is to actually get to the table, how easy it is to teach. I think those all go into it. But there's also the marketability of it. Does the company continue to reprint it? Do they make it easily accessible at a fair price? Do they continue to send games to reviewers? I think it's really important not just to send games to reviewers when the game initially comes out, but send it over the course of the lifespan of the game. I still send out, Viticulture was our first game. I still send out review copies of Viticulture because I want people to continue to discover it. New people enter the hobby all the time, and I think it's important for them to be able to discover these games. So I think it's a combination of those two things, the marketing and the marketability, those two things. Nathan says, "Do you use an app to keep track of books you've read or want to read?" Yeah, you might have just seen me kind of flick around a little bit. I just have a Google Doc that I keep from year to year. The Google Doc goes way back. Let's see how far back it goes. It goes back to 2009. Let's see what was I reading in 2009. I was reading um, The Hunger Games, Acacia, one of my favorite fantasy novels, fantasy series. Um, what else was there? The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Cloud Atlas, The Tipping Point, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Yeah, a lot of different. Wow, that takes me back. Yeah, just use a Google Doc for it. Paul says, "Do I play video games? And if so, could you name a few that really grasped you?" I very rarely play video games. Um, One of the ones that I played more, usually if I'm going to play it, it's a board game port, and or it feels like a board game like Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire is a recent one that I really enjoyed. Back in the day, I did play a lot of Mario Kart 64, but it's been a long time since I played that. And I'm always looking for, if you ever have recommendations for digital games that feel like tabletop games, let me know. I'm always curious about that. And I learn a lot from video games as a designer too. I watch a lot of videos about video games, even though I'm not playing them, because I want to learn from them as a game designer. Melanie says, "I played Legendary Encounters Alien, and I really liked it well before I even watched the movie series. Now I recently watched them and played the game again, and I love it even more. What's my favorite IP game?" What did I did a list about IP games fairly recently. I can't remember what I put on that list, but right now it has to be, Dune Imperium has to be up there for me because I really, really love Dune Imperium. And I've now read Dune. I read Dune because of Dune Imperium. Yeah. But I actually, Legendary Encounters Alien was definitely on that list because I really do enjoy that as well. Andy says that the Marvel United X-Men Kickstarter launches today. Have you played it, and are you planning to back the new expansions? I have not played it yet. I have not played it. I've heard good things about it. It seems like Dice Tower is talking about it nonstop these days, but I have not played it. Ivan says that Here to Slay, it has a light theme, but the game itself offers a lot of strategy. That's good to know. Good to know. That was a game recommendation mentioned a little bit higher up. Andy says, are there any other Kickstarters that I'm looking forward to? I really know what's coming up next. I'm looking forward to the Hall of the Mountain King sequel. I forget the name of it right now. Let's see if I'm backing anything right now, though. I don't know. Does Kickstarter let you know saved projects? Yeah, I'll see. So I'm backing Magna Roma. I'm backing Vowl, which is spelled VOWL. Those are the two active projects that I'm backing. Let's see if saved project shows me projects that are coming up soon. I don't think it does. No, it doesn't. Yeah. Because there are some projects that I'm like following, but after I click let me know of the notification when you go live, I don't remember it at all. Michael says, have you any idea when the third book in the second series of Red Rising will be available? I wish I knew, but no, I have absolutely no idea. That's for Pierce to divulge when the time comes. Tim says, do I have any last minute game recommendations? My birthday is this weekend and I'm looking for something to add. Last minute game recommendations. Tim, I know a little bit about your gaming taste because I know you enjoy Stonemaier games. So what is the game? I guess I just did that video about Tapster. So maybe check out that video I did about Tapster and see if there are any games on that list that you don't have, but that you would be intrigued to try if you enjoy Tapster. I can't remember if Tapster is one of the ones that you have tried so far, Tim. But I have a few. Check out those videos. The if you like Scythe video, the if you like Tapestry, and if you love Wingspan video. They might give you some ideas for games. Paul recommends Dwarf Romantic, which is a hexagonal tile placement digital game that I've heard feels really like a tabletop game, and also looks beautiful. I've heard good things about that. Thank you for mentioning that. And yeah, that's one that definitely comes to mind. Wynn says, I saw that you made some comments on the Kickstarter game Radland. Could you elaborate on what you think of the game? You might be thinking of somebody else, because I have not played Radland. I don't really know anything about it. The closest thing I can think of is that I did see that they created a new material for the cards in the game, which I think is just pretty cool, that they invented a new material for their game. But that's all I know about it. Tim confirmed that Tapestry is his favorite. So yeah, Tim, check out that video from this past weekend. You might get some good ideas there, and you might have even commented on it. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting that, but you may have already commented and know that video. But yeah, check out that video. You might get some ideas for this weekend. Awesome. Okay, so I think time to wrap up today. But thank you so much for joining me. Thank you again for the well wishes today and over the last week. That has meant a lot to me. My dad is doing much better now. He's back home, and I look forward to visiting him in the near future in Virginia. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday and a wonderful week, and I will be back next week at the same time. Take care.